Good evening. Welcome to those mellow sounds that got us a little ready for a good discussion. Welcome to Zion's Banner with Dr. Jeff Cran. I am having some fun with StreamYard. I have to admit that. And we're planning to make some changes, even as far as Patreon, the reward levels, and providing some exclusive content for Patreon viewers. So stay tuned. We'll be rolling out the changes slowly, but there's something I haven't been able to do for a while, and I'm going to enjoy doing this. So I'm back again. That were the people that were involved in kind of bringing the broadcast tonight. And so I wanted to give them a bit of a shout out. I haven't been able to do that for a while, and I can do that now. As I said, things will be changing, but I wanted to go ahead and kind of give a shout out to those people who are involved in making this type of content possible. And so that is just great. And I can see that Nate has arrived. You guys get to tell me what you think of StreamYard, but I'm already having more fun than I've had before. And things seem to be working than they've ever worked before. So you're going to enjoy tonight as far as the visual, because there's also a second monitor. So I think we are just going to have a good time all around. Now, if you're tuning in later, I want to greet you too and let you know that things are getting better, and hopefully we'll get better and better. So I'm going to go to screen share now, which is different. And I'm going to go ahead and screen share our PowerPoint. Isn't that nice? You'll be able to see that a lot better than usual. Now I just have to turn my head for just a split second here, just to be sure that everything is where everything should be. And give you a little background on why we're doing what we're doing. Christians are often invited on shows, and with the rise of certain conservatives that are part of what's called the Baal Teshuvah movement in Judaism, there are conservative Jews getting involved in the cultural issues of the day. But when those Christians go on, they don't necessarily always represent Christianity in a way that's going to make sense to Jewish people, because frankly, they don't necessarily think about the issues involved. Not only the questions are going to be asked on the conservative show, but spiritually as it involves the individual they'll be interacting with. This produces some trouble. And one of the things I'm going to be focusing on a lot is the narrative and the connections in the narrative, as well as theodicy. I had a great talk with my daughter, and she talked about a theodicy. And really, we are on a theodicy to learn more about apologetics and the scriptures. And so when Christians get on Jewish shows and represent Christianity in a light that may be well-intended, but may convey things to their Jewish host and to other Jews who are watching, which aren't totally accurate, that really touches my heart, because it touches my story and things that I can relate to. So did this happen? Well, this recently did happen. So let's look at it, and let's look at why the discussion came up and what it actually means. So this is a really interesting situation that ended up occurring. Now, what you see is Dr. Leighton Flowers, who has his own website. Now, if you look down in the description, you will see a link for his website. It's called Soteriology 101. Now, I'm not advocating everything on it, but I think he's trying to present a very balanced view on some topics. And he's gotten me thinking, and I like a lot of his material. In fact, some of the discussions that we have had related to Romans and election are things that he has done. He is actually a seminary level professor. And he tuned in on a broadcast with Jeff Durbin of Apologia and a Mormon. Now, I'm not here to slam Jeff Durbin and Apologia, but when he tuned into that broadcast, this particular Mormon asked about whether God caused the Holocaust. And what Leighton Flowers points out is that Jeff Durbin didn't have a good answer. He hemmed and he hawed about the mysteries of God, and God sort of did, but we shouldn't be upset that God did the Holocaust. And in a paraphrase sort of way, tried to duck the issue or tried to basically state that God's sovereignty was better. It was better to have God sovereign and be the author of the Holocaust than it was for it to be some sort of accident. Now, Leighton Flowers gives a better defense of this, but the fact that the Holocaust even came up to a Jewish audience, this is so central. This is a part of my dad's objections and narrative, and something that is very much a part of his spiritual journey. And so my ears perked up when I heard the Holocaust, and when I heard this pastor who, by the way, I'm familiar with. There's an Apologia church out here. Go ahead and kind of intimate that God was indeed the active author of the Holocaust. I kind of cringed just a little bit. But that wasn't the only thing that came up. I thought, wow, well, that's a really one in a million shot here. So I'm looking at Langston, and then I got here. Now, this is Ben Shapiro, and the description down here, but is a Christian conservative female individual. Now, understand that Ben Shapiro himself is conservative because he finds a moral kernel that is common to Christianity and Judaism. He would call that the Judeo-Christian ethic. And so he decided to have her on the show. You don't see her so much because of the shot. Now, I didn't take clips from the show. I could have, but I really didn't have Dr. Langston's permission or Jeff Shapiro's permission. And I was a little leery of trying to get the clips in here and actually play them, but I think they would have played better given the current software. So I'm giving you the overview. And so she introduced herself as a Reformed Christian. Now, I'm not going to touch that too much, except that Jeff Shapiro, being a Jewish person, thought, well, Reformed, like Reformed Judaism? I mean, what does that mean? And you got to understand that with Jewish people, when you say you're a Reformed Christian, that's sort of like saying you're a Reformed Jew. The meanings don't have the same meaning. And so she became terribly curious. And she then, he then asked her what that meant. And so she went on to explain that means that God really is sovereign over everything in such a way that people don't seem to really make decisions. They sort of think they are. Now, the way she described Calvinism, Leighton Flowers points out, would not be accepted by a Dr. Pritchard, who is a seminary professor. But nevertheless, she pointed out that many young people are embracing this particular theological system. And I thought, and Jeff Shapiro immediately asked the Jewish question, well, what about human responsibility? And I thought, that is a really Jewish question. So how do we talk to a Jewish person about the Holocaust? What are the right ways to deal with this, and what should we avoid in our discussions? And by the way, I have to let you know this happened in the midst of talking with, full disclosure, my dad. I've been doing a lot of discussing the gospel with my dad, and the problem of evil came up again. And I thought, wow, if this lady or Jeff Durbin were discussing this with my father, they would not have gotten as far. what things did I say to my father that would be things that you should know when talking about the Holocaust with your Jewish friend, and maybe even with your not Jewish friend? Let me not limit this too far. And so let me go ahead and continue with the PowerPoint here. There we go. And move things over. Now, I've got the comments up. Brother Stree says that it's 33 degrees. Not here in Arizona. We'll only get down to 45. And Elizabeth said about keeping warm. Now, I know that Australia has its summer at a different time. Okay. I also want to let you know I've been on a series of radio programs. And so tomorrow night, I'll give you the URL for the first of those. I was interviewed, but those radio programs are also podcasts, which are also YouTubes. So I'm going to give you the station to tune into and the information there. And it's on the road with Rhodey out in California. And you can see those for yourself. And you can click on her thing too. A big hello to Chris, who has just entered the room. I don't think I forgot anybody, but it is great to see you here. I like it when our number of viewers go up, but, that's just, I like to get the information out. So there's Ben Shapiro. By the way, if you ever wondered what Ben Shapiro looks like, this is Ben Shapiro. So now you know. And you'll just have to tune to the links. Remember to check the program descriptions because I will put links in there, and I also will go back and put timestamps in. This one may lend itself less to that, but you're going to see that sort of thing. So let's talk about a false dichotomy. Jeff Durbin's response. Oh, Nate heard part of. Okay, excellent. Nate is already on top of it. And by the way, Nate was in the Apologetics March Madness, and I believe I got the chance to vote for Nate. So if you're familiar with Twitter at all, you can go ahead and you can go to their site and you can vote. And so, Nate, you got my vote. Let me continue. The dangerous dichotomy was this. Jeff Durbin's response to, is God responsible for the Holocaust, was sort of like you have a choice between God being the direct author of the Holocaust and human beings making choices. In other words, or God being sovereign and being the author of the Holocaust, or God not being sovereign. That was the dichotomy he created. In other words, if God isn't the author of the Holocaust, God isn't sovereign. And if God's sovereign, he has to be the author of the Holocaust. Now, I think that's a false dilemma, and I think it's a false dilemma that Christians need to avoid, get rid of, and oppose. Let me give it to you in a very interesting way. If God sovereignly chose for human beings to make decisions, then he's still sovereign when they do. Okay, one of the factors that God has built into his universe is that as image bearers, we get to make choices. And he sovereignly decided that. And so this is a dangerous dichotomy. And a Jewish person is really going to have trouble with this dichotomy. Okay? The presupposition often with people is that God's sovereignty automatically means a diminishing of human responsibility. And you can spend some time at Soteriology 101 and take that on and filter that through for yourself. But I don't think that's a biblical view. And so I kind of want to oppose this. And so you see the slide up there, which talks about false dichotomy. One of the problems for the Jewish person is that when God gave them the revelation he gave them, in that revelation, there is an expectation that Israel is responsible, that they're moral agents, that they're responsible to the covenant, that they're held accountable for obeying or disobeying the covenant. In fact, there are actual punishments for disobeying the covenant, and there are blessings for obeying it, which would indicate that a Jewish person would have a problem with a system that eliminates in some way human responsibility in order to have God be sovereign. And that's because of the very covenant that God made with them. And so that creates some difficulty. Now let's turn to a verse. Okay. And that's Deuteronomy 30, verse 19, which says, I call heaven and earth as witnesses. Now it's Moses speaking today against you. I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life. Okay, so what God is telling Israel is that they have a choice and they're expected to choose life. Now, this is used a lot in the pro-life circles, but it isn't itself about the pro-life position. I have plenty of verses to support the idea that human beings are, human life is precious from conception, that human beings and human lives are really important. But this isn't about that. This is God lining Israel up corporately and saying, okay, I have created provisions for blessing and cursing in this covenant, and you are morally responsible to make a choice of obedience to me and choose life. And so that indicates that human beings make choices. And your Jewish person who is at all religious has heard this read in synagogues. In fact, I can go right to Logos here. Here's Logos. There's my polyglot, by the way. I have my Logos set up to have the Greek Septuagint, the Hebrew text, and the English Bible. And if you have Logos, you can do that too. And so you see the same verse there, okay, right around 19. And I don't know if my cursor will show. Okay, well, that should have been Deuteronomy 30. We go here. Okay, and I'm going to go to 30. Verse 19, there it is. Bring it up on my polyglot there. And it keeps going to Genesis 30, and I don't know why. Oh, it does not like Deuteronomy today. Maybe we'll just open Deuteronomy from the bottom there and go this way. Okay. There we go. 30 verse 19. And there it is up there. And we're going to look at the word chose. So let me get to that word chose there. I may be able to highlight it for you. Again, this is bigger, but real-time wise, okay. Like blessings and curses, there it is. Land, which is yours, which I have placed you, and you're seeing the cursor move, and probably not. And then you have the word for choose, and I'm just getting that to that right there. There we go. I'm down a little. And there's the word choose. So I've got that highlighted. Let's okay, and there's all the information. By the way, this shows you how Logos works. If you just click on a word, it brings up everything you need to know. And so it's the verb choose. We're going to talk about that verb a little more. Now, if I wanted to do a word study, I would just go over and click Bible Word Study and actually show you the resources on Logos. So that's a possibility. Now, I didn't want to do that per se, but I wanted you to focus on the lemma. That's the basic root word. And the fact that the first definition it's given, even in the word study, is the word choose. So what we're seeing here is actually that choice is a primary meaning of this word. So let me get here. Okay, and so Jewish people are used to that. And there's the verse again. The word choose there is actually in the blue, just to make it a little clearer. But I wanted to show you Logos and what it can do for you a little. Okay. Now, let's talk about what God doesn't mean, because one of the things someone could say to me is Jeff, if you made people make actual choices here in response to God at all in any way, then you're immediately stating that salvation is a works thing. Now, let me make clear the context of this. The context of this is corporate Israel. But understand that the Jew is part of corporate Israel. Question arose. Put that up. Yes, the base package should allow you to click on words. You may be limited in your number of dictionaries, but it should come with a certain number of lexicons and dictionaries. So that is true. You can go ahead and do that. But understand, Jewish people are Israel. Okay. Never mind the nonsense that goes out in certain cult groups. Jewish people are Israel. They have the history of being Israel, and they understand this. And even though it's referring to them corporately, you have to understand that it's not individual salvation that's being talked about, but it's receiving the blessings. There are certain blessings of liberty that I received as an American when I was born. And in the same way, Israel had certain blessings guaranteed from God and a certain course of discipline if they didn't obey God. And this is what this is about. But understand that individuals within the nations and the nation as a whole was expected to make choices as far as obedience and disobedience. And that's what I'm getting to. People's responses are not considered saving in themselves. So I never teach that salvation is not of the Lord. But people's responses before, during, and after salvation are genuine responses. Now, why did I say before? Because I believe in pre-evangelism. God woos those that he calls. This is a romance. And this is relationship. And so before I was saved, there were things that I responded to. Even things I knew from my background. Okay? There were things I actually believed. I believed that there was one God. I had responded to that. There were other things. I tell the story of me by the tree asking God if he still had a message for people. Did that save me? No, but that was the beginning. In fact, this whole ministry can be traced back to that incident, that life event in my life map, where God reached down, where I asked him a question, and really that question really ends up being the thing he used to a great deal. Okay. Because I believe we actually have to receive Jesus. And I know some people don't like accept, but it's a gift, and you can't have a gift if you don't receive it. And then after salvation, we still have to respond to God. They're genuine responses, but they're enabled responses. All right. And so, no, I'm not preaching a salvation through human effort. I'm preaching the genuine responses of human beings as image bearers, as God enables them, and his enabling them in the response, as opposed to creating the response with nothing to do with the individual, laying the response on them, dropping the response on their head. Okay. Now, why do I get this sort of impression? Because the Hebrew word choose means choose. And someone could say, well, maybe the Hebrew word doesn't really mean choose. Well, it does really mean choose. And it's used of human beings actually choosing. So you can't say it's never used of human beings. And that's why I stuck that out. By the way, that's under election. Okay. And it's used of God, but it's also used of man. By the way, if God was doing all the choosing and human beings didn't make genuine responses, then you would not see the word choose applied to human beings. Even in spirit, or you would not see it applied in spiritual situations. But Joshua was very clear: choose this day whom you will serve. He's placing a choice before Israel, and the idea of choose is there. A Jewish person acquainted with their own scriptures would consider the verse indicating Israel had a real choice. So Jewish people and Orthodox Judaism affirms God's sovereignty, but it also affirms human responsibility. And I think as Christians, we should do no less than doing the exact same thing. We should have a better and clearer view of God than even those who receive the first things of God's oracles. And so we're really doing a disservice when we don't do that. But that doesn't tell you how to share the Holocaust with a Jewish friend, which we will get to. Let me try to encapsulate this for you. There's a big difference between saying that God enables our decision to return to him or to turn to him. I believe he does. So we can return to him, and saying God decides for us to return to him. So I don't say to someone, God decided for you that you would accept Jesus. I tell them to come to Jesus, and when they respond to God's prompting, God will enable them to come. And so we don't preach, have God make you come to Jesus. And so very careful about that. There's a difference between saying God permits and works into his plan the decisions of evil men and saying God causes the decisions of evil men. Okay? Just saying that. I'm glad for the people that came. I hope that they come back. Okay. There are a lot of verses that make Jewish people think people make decisions. Deuteronomy is only one. Isaiah 65:12, you can look it up. I can look it up. Isaiah 66, 3 and 4. There are verses that indicate that there are decisions involved. So it's not just Deuteronomy that doesn't fit this pattern. But there are other verses. This is why Dr. Michael Brown, who is a Jewish apologist, is leery of a real tight gloss over the Bible, particularly in this area. And really, I do hope the folks come back, because they're not going to learn how to discuss the Holocaust with Jewish people if they aren't there. So, but that's okay. First of all, you need to let Jewish people know that God does care, that he's not a callous deity that just dumped this Holocaust on. He was totally isolated from the pain. He doesn't really care. He's, the passive observer or the active cause. You don't want either of those. You want to let your Jewish friend know that God indeed takes notes and cares. Let's look at a verse that indicates that God really, really feels the pain of his creation. This is a favorite verse of mine. In all their affliction, now he's referring to Israel's affliction, he was afflicted. And the angel of his presence, that's kind of interesting, because that's a reference to the angel of the Lord, saved them. In his love and in his piety, he redeemed them, and he bore them and carried them all the days of old. What God's literally saying there is that the pain or affliction that Israel felt, he felt. God is being afflicted with the afflictions of Israel. Now, by the way, understand this in its context. Israel is not a super perfectly obedient nation. And so you need to understand that he's being afflicted with the afflictions of a disobedient and rebellious nation many times. When Israel was sent to Babylon, even though they were being sent there by judgment, God still was afflicted with their affliction. Now, I don't want this to be just isolated to Jewish people, so let me give you another of my favorite verses. God is good to all. The Hebrew word is kol, by the way, and kol means kol. And his tender mercies are over all his works. So what you want your Jewish friend, when he says, where was God during the Holocaust? What you want to say is weeping. That's the proper response. Where was God during the Holocaust? Weeping. Does that make God able to feel emotions? To care? Yes, it does. It does do that. That's just a side note. Yeah, it happens. The other thing you want to do is not make this an anti-Semitic thing. Okay, you have to say that given the Holocaust, that does not mean that God did not love the Jewish people. Now, be ready for a backlash with both of those things. If you say God was weeping, someone's going to say, well, wasn't he strong enough to stop it? Be ready. We're dealing with theodicy here. If you say God still loves the Jewish people, my father would say, well, some love. What type of love is that? Maybe it would be good if he didn't love us so much. I mean, that's a very Jewish response. Now, it's a wrong response, but you want to affirm the love of God for Israel. So I stuck up Jeremiah 31:3. I have loved you with an everlasting love. However, with loving kindness, I have drawn you. By the way, I want you to understand something. An everlasting love is everlasting. Now, that sounds real obvious, but don't miss that fact. Because the same God that loves them with an everlasting love loves every follower of Jesus with an everlasting love. So when does God's love cut out on the believer? Never. When does God's love cut out on the Jewish people? Never. It's an everlasting love. So why does a loving God allow the Holocaust? He wept with us. He still loves us as a nation, as a people. Hey, it is so good to see. I've got my friend. Shout out to my friend. Just want to say hi. And I need to let you know that there's a show that he did on the Trinity and the Proto-Trinity that I promised to put a link up for. I don't know if I dare do that. But he actually used part of one of the programs I had done. So I'm going to ask Goy for Jesus if he would stick that URL up. Because I don't know if I can pull that from my computer at this exact moment. Because I'm in the midst of screen sharing. If you don't, I will go ahead. If Goy for Jesus doesn't put the link up, but it'd be great if you stuck that up there, and I will put that right on the screen. I can try and get it at the end. So why does God, who loves his creation, weeps with, and loves Israel, allow for the Holocaust? I'm so glad you asked. Because the discipline of God is real. Now, let's be careful here. The punishment of God and the discipline of God is a little different. I'm going to go to the discipline of God and look at it. And this is where I took my dad to. Okay? Not directly, but indirectly. I talked to him about the curses and the blessings. So if you're looking on board there, okay, what you should have is Deuteronomy 28:45. And I might just, can I do this? No, I can't do this. Okay. Therefore, all these curses, let's look at it together. So you look at your Bible, and I'll look at my Bible on the screen, and we'll look at it together, little side glance. Okay. Moreover, all the curses shall come upon you and pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his statutes, which he commanded you. And they shall be upon you for a sign and a wonder, and on your descendants forever, because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and gladness of heart. For abundance of everything, therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom the Lord shall send against you, in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and in need of everything. And he will put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, as swift as an eagle, a nation whose language you do not understand, a nation of fierce countenance that shall not respect the elderly or show favor to the young. That is divine discipline. And so you have to understand the discipline is real. Now, if I say that to my father, it's like, well, wait a minute, this discipline is incredible. Why would God discipline Israel like that? Well, because Israel had a unique responsibility. And so I went to my dad and I said, Israel had a unique responsibility. And so God set up severe penalties for misrepresenting him because of their unique function. Well, what was their unique function? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Isaiah 48:8. Fear not, nor be afraid. I told you that from that time and declared to you, you are my witnesses. There is no God beside me. Indeed, there is no other rock I know of. I know no one. I'm real interested in that. Going for Jesus can let me know which verse is a trap. Okay. Oh, probably the oneness of God. That's okay. We've covered that. The response to that, let me deal with that because that's worthwhile. And you get to see his logo. Isn't that cool? That is like excellent branding. That verse doesn't have to be a trap because, first of all, the context of the verse has to do with idolatry and multiple gods. And that came up with my dad too. And my response to that was, the cursing passage. I'd like to hear the trap. So Going for Jesus can share the trap and we can discuss it. I thought it was there's no other. I'd like to hear how the cursing passage used as a trap. So you can go ahead and throw that up there. It could be great discussion. Their purpose was to be witnesses of monotheism in a polytheistic world. Remember that there weren't monotheistic nations running around. What advantage has the Jew? This is a good question. Paul has just ended up dealing with how Jewishness doesn't save you. And the question comes up, well, then big deal. They never really had any sort of advantage going in. And Paul says, what profit circumcision? And he says, much in every way. There is a value to it because to them were committed the oracles of God. And he goes on to say some did not believe. And he goes on to explain that. But the bottom line here that you need to understand is that Israel had a unique purpose and they were promised discipline. So how do I deal with my dad on this? How do I wrap this up with my unsaved Jewish dad? Well, what I said to my dad was, our people signed the contract. Why are you complaining? Okay. There's the response. Here's my response to it. We're not saying Jewish people deserve the Holocaust. We're saying that God's covenant included provisions for disobedience, and that actually, we're all deserving of the same treatment that was given. So we're not any better than you. But what we're saying is God is better than both of us. And that actually what God is saying is because you hold a unique position, I have put provisions into my covenant of discipline. Just like a father disciplines his children, so God disciplines you. So it's not a matter of desert. It's a matter of the covenant. And your people ratified that covenant. And you have a unique position. So if someone says to me, I'm anti-Jewish. Well, first of all, I can't be anti-Jewish because I am Jewish. And I don't hate my people. And second of all, stating what the Torah states about God's provisions for discipline is not hating the Jewish people. It's honoring Torah. That's a kind of a good response. Taking seriously God's provisions for disciplining his people, Israel, is not hating the Jewish people. It's loving the Torah. Because I'm taking it seriously. And you should take it seriously too. So I don't know how that works. But that was my response to my dad. We signed the contract. We entered into this agreement. This is just part of the agreement. Okay. Now, God provides strength in trial. This is good for us to pay attention to. There were people who survived. And God, how did they get seen through? Yeah, it really messed them up. We're not saying this was a good thing. What we are saying is, who do you think provided the strength for there to be any survivors? You know, I once said to my dad, instead of looking at the 6 million that died, why is anyone still around? Somebody was with them. Somebody saw them through. Somebody saw that they survived. And let's give credit where credit is due. Okay? God will ultimately overcome evil. Hey, look, this is a long-term game. This isn't a short, a short thing. This is like a tennis championship or tournament, not a single game. So let's not judge the outcome of the tournament by a single match. It is possible that that's linked. In private chat, you can send me the link, I think. So I'll go back to, no, I guess it doesn't work like that. Well, I promised I'd put it up there for you. And I think I may have it. So I'm going to put up Word and see if it comes up okay. And if it does, I'll just put Word right up there. Okay. I want to do that for you, so I feel kind of bad. It was last week. I'm going to do something here. I know you sent it to me, but hey, I know what I can do. I can screen share more than one screen. Let me go over here. Let me go to YouTube. I'm going to put this down for a second. Put this up. Punch in Goy for Jesus. And I'm going to misspell it because that's the way I am. Okay? Because if I say I'm going to do something, I really like to do it. There we go. I'm on your station. Oops, I better not show that, right? By the way, you're doing excellent. I can't get that. Last week. Oh, there it is. Let me pull the link. Oh, it's not going to let me pull the link, is it? Excellent number of views. There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Nate. Trying to do this when you're on is a little difficult. So, Nate saved me again. Good job, Nate. You don't get the blue screwdrivers on my my dash screen on this StreamYard, but I still recognize them on Facebook. So you have just done the mod to the excellent. We have two verses here. Actually, what we have is Isaiah 65. Did you know that the material that occurs in Revelation is actually direct lead back to the material in Isaiah? It starts, "Behold, I create a new heavens and earth." Look at it together. The former shall not be remembered nor come to mind. Rejoice but be glad, rejoice, in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem as a rejoicing, and her people as a joy. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people. And it goes on from there. By the way, it talks about material from Isaiah 11 with the fox and the lamb feeding together. The lion will eat straw like an ox. It's right out of Isaiah 2. And so this is right out of Isaiah. So don't think the material about like a new heavens and new earth does not appear in the Old Testament. It's a direct connection back. And you see, the New Testament, going back to Isaiah, says the same thing. I saw a new heavens and earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there will be no sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming out of the heavens from God, prepared like a bride adorned for her husband. And there's the same material. God will ultimately deal with evil. He will ultimately take care of evil. And so that's something too. The Holocaust was a temporary thing, and all evil will be destroyed. So here's where we're at. Theologies that deny human responsibility or human agency, and I put free will. I know there's a discussion of types of human freedom, libertarian and complementarian, but human agency is the ability to exercise a choice on some level. They present a problem. Jewish people are going to have a problem. And so be aware of that. You can't just get away with the fact that, well, it's just a mystery. No, you need to affirm the positive things. God indeed feels the pain of his creation. God indeed still loves the Jewish people. The Jewish people experience discipline because of their unique position, not because God's nasty. Okay. But with great privilege comes with great power comes great responsibility. Can I quote Spider-Man here? With great power comes great responsibility. Well, with great privilege comes great responsibility. For every privilege, there is a responsibility. And so where there is failed responsibility, there is discipline. So you want to discuss those two things. You want to move on, those things. God's unique covenant relationship. God has furnished a way to walk through suffering. And finally, God ultimately will defeat evil. And those are points there. I'd like to hear from Goy for Jesus how he found that response to the Holocaust verses. That they're really affirming Torah and affirming that God set up provisions in his covenant for divine discipline. And so I'm honoring the Torah by taking seriously Deuteronomy and who it was written to. So any response is absolutely welcome there. But that's kind of where I would go. Is essentially I'm respecting the text, not being anti-Semitic. Oh, thank you for that. Oh, yes. What a beautiful comment. Absolutely not. It's something in the Westminster of faith that no Jewish person in Jesus's day, from Abraham to Jesus's day, ever believed. And if you read the prophets, our God is a passionate God. He's described as a lover in Hosea. The covenant relationship is described as a marital type relationship. I mean, that's the picture that's used. God is talked about being passionate for his people, zealous for his people. By the way, the word zealous in Hebrew is the same word as the word jealous, negatively used as human peak of jealousy, positively used as divine zealousness. And by the way, the reason is that there can be a zeal for God that is a good zeal. There can be a zeal for one's marital partner that's a good zeal. It's a misused zeal in its as a positive thing. That is what jealousy is. Jealousy is the misuse of something. So God is not without emotions. The Old Testament describes a passionate God, a God that very much is full of emotion. By the way, if we're made in his image and we experience emotions, why would we assume that he didn't have them? No. That is a Neoplatonic, or that is a Greek Platonic idea that got brought into the church, and it doesn't belong there. So, definitely not. So, we're tying it up, barring more comments, but you see some positive things you can share with your Jewish friend. You can share that God deeply cared and felt the pain of those in the Holocaust. You can share that God has an abiding love for the Jewish people. You can share that Israel has a unique position, and so there are unique features or unique discipline built into the covenant, and that Israel agreed to this covenant. God agreed to this covenant, and the Holocaust, I want to be careful I state this, the Holocaust is connected to the fact that God has the right to discipline Israel because of the relationship he has to them. And even though that the blessings of the covenant are not Israel's because they're outside of the covenant, they have essentially, they didn't enter into the new covenant. God's love for them still remains. That's what Romans 11 is about. Okay, they're enemies of the gospel for your sake, but they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. That's exactly what Paul is pointing to. And then God ultimately will defeat evil. And those are the things that you can share with a Jewish person when it comes to the Holocaust. Excellent. Okay. Additional comments. I do want to thank Goy for Jesus again for going ahead and using that clip. I really appreciate it. And he put links to my channel on the clip. So I really wanted to see that happen for him. And it was a really good discussion as I watched it. So I'd encourage you to watch it too. He did a great job in pulling the clip, by the way. One of the hardest things I find is actually pulling a clip and bringing it up and using it. And the sound was there and everything. Okay. So Ben Shapiro, there are answers. Dennis Pranger, there are answers. But I'm not going to make God I'm still going to blame evil men for the evil that's done and believe that there's this beautiful balance. And again, if there's any picture I could create, it's a child learning to walk for the first time. Okay, when I was learning to walk, my parents had to enable me to take the steps. I couldn't do it on my own. So my steps are a picture of choices and actions in the Bible. My parents enabled my steps, but I still had to take them. So take that picture, because I think that's a central picture in the big narrative as far as that. Still want to do Abel with you. Hey, actually, if I maintain a StreamYard, we probably could have had you on the program before, but StreamYard actually allows me to invite a guest on. So to go for Jesus, we got to work on arranging that at some time in the near future. Be in touch. Just so contact info. There's some contact info. Okay. Oops. There we go. That's contact info. And that's probably the quickest way to get a hold of me. And then I will go ahead. And you can even leave. Okay. We'll email. Excellent. All righty. Well, it looks good. A little short this evening. Tomorrow night, how did Jesus deal with politics? A look at him being challenged by the Pharisees and the Herodians on the temple tax. And that'll be fun. So look at God's big story in terms of what's going on there and a scene in God's big story. And then we'll relate how Jesus acted within that scene. And then we'll look at how it relates to us. So that'll be good. And Elizabeth put a shout out there. Well, let me go ahead and do that. There you go. Our sister from down under has been doing some nice stuff with videos, reading scripture, I believe, also. And parts of Australia that I will never see. And so there's the channel. And so she's looking for a sub, somebody to go ahead. Oh, sorry. Subscribers. And so you are free to visit Australia without taking a plane. And go ahead and do that. So. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say good night. I've never done that on StreamYard. By the way, prayers are wanted for the prayer warriors as I get ready to try and put together a Zoom Bible study on Messianic prophecy. And what I'm going to try to do is do some things to reach out to unsaved Jewish people and Jewish believers, which may include boosting a post in Facebook. Also, a few other things. I do want to put a banner up there. There you go. If you want to support the content creation side of this ministry, this sort of stuff, maybe even boosting that YouTube post, you can go ahead and subscribe to Patreon. Okay. If you already subscribe to us, you already support us via, Chosen People, that's great. But there are some things I do or want to do that it's real helpful for. Okay, I'm going to go back to comments here. Okay, and it looks like, okay, so someone's going to be seeing more of Australia. Excellent. Thanks for that feedback, Steve. I feel good about having less glitches. So, and I think the pictures show better. So I'm pretty pleased. So I may end up transitioning. I still am stuck with part of a subscription to Restream, but I might just let that subscription run out and then sign up now with StreamYard. By the way, Patreon often covers things like that. So StreamYard, things like that, those aren't CPM things. Okay. And thank you, Nate D2. Those are just not normative professional expenses. Probably could be, but it just doesn't work real well. So thanks so much, Nate, for the thing there. And to our sister down under, I hope many people tune in. I have to admit, sometimes when you're prepping, you don't spend as much time, but I'll try to grab part of that. If you don't mind someone coming in and out, maybe, or figuring out whether they can sub, I'd love to see more of Australia. By the way, Elizabeth has posted some things on Facebook that I've really appreciated. I think you posted something really humorous this morning that I actually reposted. But she posts some stuff from Australia and links to her post and Bible verses. I think I've seen a few Bible verses that have been really encouraging. So, well, I think it's time to go. It's much later where you are, all except Australia, which is probably earlier, but not the same day. So